Electric power is everywhere present in unlimited quantities. It can drive the world's machinery without the need of coal, oil, gas, or any other fuel. This new power for the driving of the world's machinery will be derived from the energy which operates the universe, the cosmic energy.
Tesla helped to create almost everything that we use today, including alternating current. He had over 700 patents, including robots, spark plugs, electric arc lamps, X-ray devices, bladeless turbines, wireless communication, laser technology, neon lights, remote controls, communication, radio, electrical baths, radars, and much more. He designed and built Wardenclyffe Tower in 1901 to 1902. It was a huge wireless transmission station located in New York City. The project was funded by infamous bankster J.P. Morgan for communication purposes. He planned to transmit messages, telephony, and facsimile images across the Atlantic to England. Tesla realized this tower could provide free energy and wireless communication to every person on Earth. Literally using the Earth itself as a conductor, he could light the sky of every city and power the world's machinery. Nikola Tesla's true plans were to advance humanity for the better of all mankind. He was the futurist. However, J.P. Morgan determined he wouldn't profit from it since at the time this energy could not be metered. He refused to continue funding after realizing Tesla's true vision. The project was abandoned in 1906. Tesla had a very interesting interview with the New York Tribune where he stated, "I would have already been sending messages across the ocean without the use of wires by this time if the public were not so hard to convince that it could be done. It takes time to assure people of the truth of new discoveries. It was 6 or 8 years before the people believed in my system of transmitting electrical power. Now it is used everywhere." Today we communicate instantly across the world with a mini computer in our pocket. Tesla also said that unmanned aircraft were possible and he developed plans for them. These would have utilized his free energy system. Today we have many unmanned remote-controlled drones used for spying and for killing. Rumor is he modified a Pierce Arrow car to have an electric motor with a cosmic energy power receiver. Now we have fancy government-funded vehicles for the rich upper class. There's also many articles detailing Tesla's claim of having built a death ray. In 1898, Tesla claimed that he built and deployed a small oscillating device. When this device was attached to a building, it could simulate earthquakes. He demonstrated this. He never minded Edison stealing his X-ray patent or the refusal of modern-day AC current, because he did not live for his modern time. As previously stated, he was the futurist. His hotel suite was raided by the government when he died in New York City. Many of Nikola Tesla's patents are still missing and unaccounted for to this day. He died at 85 years old in his hotel suite alone. Some people referred to him as the electrical wizard. This is New York City in the 1900s, on the Hudson River looking toward the piers of Lower Manhattan. And this is the approximate site of the World Trade Center. Not too far from where Nikola Tesla passed away. And then, war.
We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development. Yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
No bull. Michael Jordan hints he'll return to the court, this time as a Washington Wizard. Extensive coverage in this hour. There is something in the air.
It is 8 a.m. in Salisbury, North Carolina, 7 a.m. in Chicago, 5 a.m. in Calaveras County, California, where the news is being made on this Tuesday, September 11th.
Good morning, everybody, again. For the second time in 2 weeks, the U.S. has lost an unmanned spy plane over Iraq.
Thanks, Ann. Tonight, three numbers that could save your life. 911, 190 million calls each year, but you won't believe the problems we found.
Miles and miles of sunshine. Miles Davis. We're going to put Miles out there today. Nice as it can be across the Northeast. Rough seas still from the chop from that hurricane, but other than that, it's kind of quiet around the country. We like quiet. It's quiet. It's too quiet.
Today's weather is brought to you by Walmart. Always low prices. Always.
Beautiful morning here in the Northeast. Let's check the rest of your weather, show you what's going on for today. And you'll see that we've got clear skies throughout much of the country, some showers in the northern plains, some wet weather down in Florida, where they'll be picking up as much as 7 inches of rain in parts of central and southern Florida. Partly cloudy skies in the Pacific Northwest. The heat continues in the desert Southwest.
Okay, I have got to interrupt you right now.
Sorry.
Richard Hack, thank you very much. We appreciate the book is called Hughes. We want to go live right now and show you a picture of the World Trade Center, where I understand, do we have it? No, we do not. We have a breaking story, though. We're going to come back with that in just a moment. First, this is Today on NBC.
CNN breaking news.
This just in, you are looking at obviously a very disturbing live shot there. That is the World Trade Center, and we have unconfirmed reports this morning that a plane has crashed into one of the towers.
That is about as frightening a scene as you will ever see.
The person who answered the phone said, "We're blanking dying," when asked what was happening, and hung up. There was screaming and yelling in the background, and a follow-up call was not answered.
It pulled it down on itself.
Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country. I have spoken to the Vice President, to the Governor of New York, to the Director of the FBI, and have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act. Terrorism against our nation will not stand. And now, if you join me in a moment of silence. May God bless the victims, their families, and America. Thank you very much.
At this point, we have 9 years of hard scientific evidence that disproves the government theory about what happened on September 11th, and yet people continue to be either oblivious to the fact that this information exists or completely resistant to looking at this information. So the question becomes why? Why is it that people have so much trouble hearing this information? From my work, I think we would be remiss not to look at the impact of trauma. My name is Marty Hopper, and I'm a PhD clinical psychologist. I've been working and living for the past 30 years here in Boulder, Colorado. For the past 11 years, my work has focused on helping people who have experienced personal trauma. Now, as we know, the horrors of what happened on 9/11 were televised all over the world, and they were televised, in fact, live. We witnessed the deaths of almost 3,000 of our fellow Americans. We know this had a very severe and traumatic impact on a large majority of the population.
This is so shocking, of course, to everybody watching.
That is a very hard thing to watch.
To watch powerless is a horror.
What we have been fearing for the longest time here apparently has come to pass.
You saw it here live.
Never would imagine we would see in our lifetime.
An hour and a half in which the world in the United States has changed dramatically.
We have no idea really what might happen next.
The military-industrial complex, akin to and largely responsible for the sweeping changes in our industrial military posture, has been the technological revolution during recent decades. In this revolution, research has become central. It also becomes more formalized, complex, and costly. A steadily increasing share is conducted for, by, or at the direction of the federal government. Today, the solitary inventor, tinkering in his shop, has been overshadowed by task forces of scientists in laboratories and testing fields. In the same fashion, the free university, historically the fountainhead of free ideas and scientific discovery, has experienced a revolution in the conduct of research. Partly because of the huge costs involved, a government contract becomes virtually a substitute for intellectual curiosity.
It's quite possible that our culture will enter an age of alchemy by these low-energy nuclear reactions.
Direct energy in such a way to disrupt the molecular bonds.
Adding to or picking apart or changing the nucleus of atoms.
You know, there's that dreadful word alchemy, which we mustn't use, but it was a form of that in a way.
What this leads to is an analogy with the old claims of the alchemists.
And this indeed is a technology that can be used for free energy. It doesn't need to be used for evil purposes.
Journey back to a dark time when science and magic were one. When a shadowy brotherhood embarked on an esoteric quest for gold, divine wisdom, and the secrets of immortality. The ancient craft of alchemy. In their dark, hot, smoky workshops, alchemists labored hard to create the philosopher's stone by following ancient mystical formulas, mixing, melting, and dissolving minerals in a strange process they called transmutation, part metallurgy, part mythology. At Harvard University in 1941, physicists brought the power of the atomic age to the ancient alchemical work of transmutation. Using the newly invented particle accelerator, they bombarded 400 grams of mercury with high-velocity neutrons and transformed a tiny amount of the mercury into gold. This was the first scientifically documented transmutation in history.
And transmutation is exactly what it sounds like. It's when one atom converts to another atom. It mutates, it changes. So when you think about it, all nuclear reactions are transmutation reactions. But we have things that are called induced nuclear transmutation reactions. And that's when we force a reaction to occur, when we have something that's not radioactive and we force it to change it to something else.
So, you want a new investigation into the events of 9/11? Well, it's your lucky day. There is one already in progress. However, it is ignored by almost all 9/11 researchers and posters around the Internet.
My name is Christian Hampton. I'm an independent filmmaker and an audio engineer for Wolf Clan Media. The purpose of this film is to document evidence. There will be minor speculation. The main purpose is to document proof of a technology that exists, something that could be used for good. However, it was demonstrated as a weapon on September 11th, 2001.
The Trade Center complex had consisted of 7 buildings. The attack on the Twin Towers destroyed all of them. The South Tower was the first to fall. The Marriott Vista Hotel was crushed. A half an hour later, the North Tower collapsed. World Trade Centers 4, 5, and 6 were left standing, but damaged beyond repair. World Trade Center 7 fell after burning for 7 hours.
So it's the 29th of October. I'm with Dr. Judy Wood in Brighton in the UK. You're visiting here and touring around, and you have your book with you, which is Where Did the Towers Go is the title of your book for readers that aren't familiar. And it's such a marvelous title and picture because the 9/11 towers just disappeared and vanished after they disappeared. Could you please explain, Dr. Judy Wood, your theory and what your message is?
Well, I don't really have a theory. I show evidence. This is evidence. Theory is when you're guessing at something, whether it's a physical phenomenon or whatever. I'm looking at what is there and very carefully going through what is there because it's something we've never seen before. And it's quite phenomenal what happened because there were these 2 huge towers there and then they were gone. They went away. How did they go away?
Please tell us how they went away.
They primarily turned to dust. And what I would start out with is, let's see, page 191 is a good page to start on. You have these, this is the elevation map of what was left. Here's what should have been there before. And right here, people survived that little hump at the bottom of Building 3. The rest of Building 3 was gone. And the bottom of Tower 1, that little hump there, 14 people survived. They looked up and saw blue sky. They weren't squashed.
But then the strangest thing happened. This beam of sunlight came right in on us, like about 8 inches long, but it was clearly sunlight. It was all dirty, full of debris, and it looked like pepper was floating around in it, sort of. But it was sunlight, and I'm like amazed now. It's a 110-story building above us, and I'm looking up at the sun.
He was at the base of this building while this picture was being taken. And all 14 of them walked out on their own steam.
The collapse of the North Tower killed over 1,300 people trapped inside the building. But some of the concrete walls encasing Stairway B had remained intact, and enclosed within them, 14 people were still alive. As they opened their eyes, it seemed as if a miracle had happened.
You could, from where we were standing, see that second building, but you can't see it anymore.
You know what day the picture was taken because Building 7 is still standing, so it was before 5 p.m. on 9/11.
Tower 2 is basically missing. Tower 1 is missing over there.
I mean, you didn't find a shard of glass, anything that looked like would be used by a person, you just didn't see.
The buildings turned to dust before they even reached the ground. You can actually see this happening. You can watch any of the videos from the news channels. They all show the same thing.
We thought we knew what we saw.
A plane hitting the building should not turn the buildings into dust.
We've got to start looking at this whole situation a lot differently than we have up until now.
The remarkable works of Canadian inventor John Hutchison has drawn widespread attention from businessmen and government scientists since 1979, when he began using ultra-high electromagnetic frequencies to transform matter in some very unusual ways. It has come to be known as the Hutchison effect.
The objects you're seeing moving there is a form of levitation by translational movement, meaning that the objects become lighter and can float around. The heaviest being the barium cylinder that you see there with the two wires coming out of it. It tends to slide around on 7 pounds of its own weight. Physics of it is a self-resonation of what they call ferromagnetic and piezoelectric barium titanate through a power amplifier and broad and narrow bands of electrical energy going into this crystal.
Ferromagnetic, or according to Wikipedia, ferromagnetism. It is the basic mechanism by which certain materials such as iron form permanent magnets or become attracted to magnets. In physics, several different types of magnetism are distinguished. Ferromagnetism is the strongest type. It's the only one that creates a force strong enough to be felt, and it's responsible for the common phenomena of magnetism encountered in everyday life. Things like electromagnets, electric motors, generators, transformers, magnetic storage like tape recorders, hard disks, videotapes.
The Earth itself is a giant magnet. Researchers today believe that magnetism comes from currents in the liquid metals in the Earth's core. But magnetism is more than an invisible force protecting the Earth and guiding its inhabitants. Together with electricity, magnetism ignited the machine age and created the modern world.
The discovery of a permanently magnetic material in human tissues is a surprise. I mean, if I take a magnet, it doesn't normally stick to my head or to my fingers, and the assumption was that there's probably nothing ferromagnetic there. But it turns out nobody had looked.
So we've got magnets in our brains.
Electricity and magnetism are used to make motors run, to make videotapes work. They're used in our cars and our stereos. They're part of our world. If you choose not to know about something like that, then it becomes magic.
Piezoelectric, or piezoelectricity. Piezoelectric effect is the ability of certain materials to generate an electric charge in response to applied mechanical stress. This is certain solid materials such as crystals, ceramics, and biological matter like bone and DNA and other various proteins in response to applied mechanical stress. Bone and DNA.
The concrete floors, the furniture, the computers, and the file cabinets weren't the only things missing after the collapses. The Twin Towers were also filled with people. Inexplicably, though, almost half of the victims' bodies seem to have disappeared into thin air. When a building collapses, the victims tend to remain trapped between the pancaking floors. They may be crushed and mangled, but in most cases they remain in one piece. In fact, on the morning of September 11, local hospitals prepared to receive hundreds of victims they expected to be extracted from the rubble. Practically no one arrived. According to the chief medical examiner, 2,749 victims died in the Twin Towers, but fewer than 300 whole bodies were recovered. Nearly 20,000 pieces of bodies were found in the ruins, more than 6,000 small enough to fit in 5-inch test tubes. 200 different pieces were matched to a single person. 1,630 victims were eventually identified, 800 of which by DNA alone. This means that for 800 victims, there were no body parts large enough to be recognizable. The remaining 1,119 victims were never identified. This means that for more than 40% of the victims, not even a fragment large enough to recover DNA was found.
Hutchison's more dramatic experiments border on the paranormal and have generated more than just a passing interest from U.S. military research labs.
We've had about 750 demonstrations of levitation, translational movements, metallurgical samples falling apart, changing into transmuted unknown metals. Quite a variety of obscure types of effects, wood impregnated into metals, other objects in metals, monopole magnetic fields written up in many journals. Quite a host, or a Pandora's box, of different types of effects on the outer edge of the scientific community.
In this remarkable series of video clips shot by Hutchison, we see what happens when he fine-tunes the electromagnetic frequencies aimed at target objects in his garage.
On the subatomic level, I feel that there is a dimension shift activated by very conventional electrostatics, RF fields that I use, and Tesla waves that I use, that actually form a keyway that opens up another area of time and space that may activate the zero-point energy fields, and somehow causing a distortion which causes objects to simply break apart or pulsate in the center of stainless steel bars and fall apart, or to become weightless.
What is interesting and also frustrating about his invention is that he's using a combination of Tesla coil and Van de Graaff to produce a very disruptive and lifting experiments, which in one case, for example, actually lifts a 19-pound bushing toward the ceiling just from electromagnetic fields. Actually lends itself to an anomalous new force. So the Hutchison effect has been used as a benchmark for a comparison to many other high voltage propulsion devices. Electrogravity, in other words.
Seen this guy, Nikola Tesla. He can generate all of these various pieces of evidence, all these different phenomena. So can John Hutchison. When he tried to replicate the work of Nikola Tesla, he discovered all of these characteristics. And all of those characteristics were found at the World Trade Center site. George Pigott got a patent just about 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago. Levitation. He's got a static field, and he's doing some other things with putting in some kind of energy, and he's got these static balls, these steel balls levitating. I think they're actually silver. Here's John Hutchison standing in front of the Great Pyramid. There's a person down here in the background. You can see they're almost 2 blocks tall. Well, that's about the same height as this doorway of Coral Castle.
So they're about the same size blocks. They're 15 tons each. So this guy built his castle by himself. We don't know how this one was built. We can only guess.
For hundreds of years, men have searched for the Ark of the Covenant in order to unlock its secrets. But what was the Ark and the immense power that it contained? And why did it kill some of those who touched it? Was it an object of divine power, or could it have been a man-made device? Come with me as I investigate who Moses really was and unravel the ancient science behind the most famous holy relic of all.
Anything can happen, I guess.
So you're not concerned then?
Well, that'd be fun. What the hell? Why not? You only live once, right?
Let her rip.
The experiment did seem to be a success.
Voltage, the power of voltage.
This whole thing disintegrated.
Oh my gosh.
It just blew apart. It disintegrated.
That's a lot of energy to do that.
And that is a lot of energy to do that. This is World Trade Center 3, aka the Marriott Hotel. Right after Tower 2 was destroyed, this big gouge was missing out of the building. A huge vertical slice separating the northern edge of it. This was before Tower 1 was destroyed. And after Tower 1 was destroyed, the rest of World Trade Center 3 went away. And then we had these 3 racks of steel beams left sticking out of the ground. And the only thing left was the base of WTC-3. This little tiny stub here in the left-hand corner. This image is looking northeast across from where Tower 1 used to be just a couple hours earlier. Giant 210-story buildings. From this, all the way down to this.
Very large, heavy steel bar. As you can see here, the crumbling material here is off the end of this bar here. And actually is a transmuted material that is unknown in the metallurgical handbooks. Extremely rare material that appears to be a major transmutation.
In this image, Building 4 is missing the main body. The only thing left is the north wing of the building. The towers and the body of Building 4 are completely missing. Where did the rest of these buildings go? Bankers Trust is 40 stories tall, So there's another 70 stories of building above that should be there. It's missing. More than half of this building is missing in this image. In this image taken right after 9/11, you can see that Tower 1 is completely overshadowed by the leftover 8 stories of Building 6. Something just doesn't add up in this footage. There should be at least another 100 stories of the north wall from Tower 1 left over on the ground there. Where is all the rubble?
What about the dust? There was a lot of dust. As it happens, here is Tower 1 and Tower 2. A large portion of it filled New York, filled the air, went everywhere. Landed on the fruit. It's like a fresh snow.
Here's a shot from the north where you can see the aluminum cladding that covered the steel beams. It's flying off the building, however, it's not trailing any dust. For some reason, the steel beams that are falling are trailing dust. It's like the steel was affected differently than the aluminum. This image shows more of the steel with dust shooting out the back of it like a rocket. The materials of the entire building are literally turning into dust right in front of our eyes. This is Tower 2, closer to the ground, and there are no solid pieces of steel left falling. There's just aluminum cladding and dust. And then there was dust everywhere. When vehicles drove down the road, it kicked dust in the air and it just lingered. Unlike normal dust from a pickup truck on a dirt road, this dust didn't settle back out. It was breathed in and it landed on everybody. This is 4 consecutive shots where you can see the steel columns turning into dust. Number 1, 2, 3, 4. It just crumbles into nothing. And this is video footage showing the same thing.
One nation in the world has over 1,000 military bases. They say it's religion when clearly it isn't. It's not just Muslims that oppose your imperialism. Is Hugo Chavez a Muslim? Nah, I didn't think so. Is Castro a Muslim? Nah, I didn't think so. It's like the definition didn't ever exist. I guess it's all just dependent who your nemesis is. Irrelevant how eloquent the rhetoric peddler is. They're telling fibs now. Tell us who the terrorist is.
So is this what happened to the entire building? Perhaps. Let's look at it a little bit more carefully. These core columns that were left standing for whatever reason are strong and rigid. That's a very tall, unsupported column. And the next frame starts to tip, and then it turns to dust before it even tips over. And as this dust cloud rolls out, it's very energetic. It looks like it's boiling. It's expanding in all directions. tremendous amount of dust.
Known as a pyroclastic flow, this eruption of 1,500-degree gas and rock speeds down the mountain.
If you are still wondering what happened to the Twin Towers, well, here they are. The buildings, the people, everything. Office supplies, glass, marble, turned into dust, flowing through lower Manhattan, being breathed in by everybody.
And it looks pretty uniform in size, except for the paper.
The paper was everywhere, and none of it was burned. It didn't make any sense. Fires bursting in flames on a car, but a cardboard under it not even touched.
But most interesting, in the mix, they are looking, they think, at specks of steel that used to be beams and elevators, marble from the lobby floor and facings. So what were once the strongest architectural elements in the two towers were pulverized, large portions turned into clouds like this one. Still, there is this mystery. If some of the hardest materials were vaporized, how to account for the presence everywhere of paper? Fully intact letters, business forms, stationery. Paper is so fragile and combustible, and yet somehow, maybe because we have so much of it, it was everywhere.
In fact, using only 75 watts of energy, it would also fuse dissimilar materials, heat metal but not burn the wood it sat on, shatter metal as well as change its crystalline structure. This was something to write home about.
If you didn't hear what he just said, let me slow it down a little for you.
It would also fuse dissimilar materials, heat metal but not burn the wood it sat on, shatter metal as well as change its crystalline structure.
Another huge piece of evidence from Ground Zero is the holes. So if you look at this image of Building 6, there are a bunch of 20-foot holes, cylindrical cutouts in the building, and most of them are all the same in diameter. And if you look into this hole, you'll notice it goes all the way down to ground level. This was 8 stories of building missing. It was like an ice cream scoop was taken out of the middle of it. This is a look from inside that building, and if you count down from the top, you have 8 stories down to ground level. There's a bunch of material just missing. Here's an image of Building 5. It has the same round cylindrical holes. Some of these ones are larger. But debris did not do this. It's completely missing. There was a large round hole in the middle of Liberty Street, and this outer wall was leaning back with the cutout. And if you look down in there, down into the hole, you'll notice these sub-levels have reinforced concrete bars sticking out. And a bizarre eroded steel beam turned into practically nothing. Another hole there. Here. If you start looking, you'll notice these holes are everywhere. If you lifted this up and you look down into this hole, the emergency workers are walking through a puddle of water. That's it. And this photo was taken 7 days after the attacks.
interesting phenomenon is toasted cars. Large number of toasted cars. I don't mean just a few burnout cars. I mean this weird things happening that don't make sense.
After the second tower was destroyed, all of these cars supposedly caught on fire. But none of the paper in between the buildings and the cars is on fire. So how could the cars be burning when nothing in between is burned? And after the fire stopped, all of these cars look completely rusted and eroded. Some of them only halfway, and the paint will still be good. These cars are 6 blocks away on FDR Drive. They look crazy. This door looks melted away, the frames for the windows are wilted over. Tires are gone, but the belting is still there. This van was parked a building away by the post office, but what happened to it? The sides are eaten out, the wheels are missing. There's no way this could be from debris. There's no damage to the roof. These ones suffered from random spontaneous combustion. This is that lot where the paint looks fine here, but toasted here. I don't know what happened to this. And this vehicle was sitting on top of this one. How could it have gotten so rusted the day after 9/11?
Look at these 2 cars placed on top of one another. I think when you think about the impact that these planes must have had, it's hard to visualize it because everything melted. But here, at least you have some remnants. You have literally an engine that is melded together with other parts of the car. Moving over, you've got another car they moved here. It looks like it's been through a war. You can see the papers, all the burned out papers from the building. You see the soot and the dirt, and it just shows you how devastating this blast was. Look across the street there. You've got a Con Ed truck that, some of the Con Ed people now looking at, examining, trying to figure out which truck that actually was. But that truck too, in terrible shape. So while many of the items, the steel, was literally melted.
Everywhere at Ground Zero there were cars burning, but not the paper. There's paper in this tree and fire all around it. This looks like an intense fireball engulfing these vehicles. Both of these trucks lost their engines. This one lost the cab too. And the ladder on here looks as if it's completely transmuted into something else. This van is rusted and missing all of its door handles. There were actually quite a few vehicles missing door handles. This is West Broadway Street. Obviously, something intense took place here. And this is a top view of the same street. That pyroclastic flow of dust definitely did something interesting as it raced down Manhattan. Everything on that street was either toasted or flipped over.
Never in 20 years of shooting in New York have I run from an assignment but something in the back of my head just said, run. And as I hit the corner of Liberty Street, it was almost being picked up by a tornado, almost being picked up by a wave. It was like being picked up by
the black cloud.
That black cloud had substance. It was like night, but it had a solid feel to it. It was like gravel, hot gravel, and just picked me up and tossed me about a block. At one second I was running, and the next second I was airborne. And I lost my glasses, I lost my cell phone, I lost my pager, but managed to hold on to both cameras.
But it threw you for a block?
I was back down at Ground Zero last week and walked the area where I have a pretty good recollection of where I was and where I wound up, and it was just under a city block.
There was this blast of warm air. It wasn't hot. It was warm. And it picked me up and threw me up against the wall of the building I was...
You were picked up off the ground.
Physically picked up off the ground.
This bizarre white cloud continued to push upwards against the wind for at least 3 months after the so-called collapse, even through different weather conditions. The reason for this is the same reason the towers disappeared. This is leftover material literally disintegrating. Technically speaking, this was molecular dissociation.
What is this haze? Is it fire? Fire would have a point source. You could see where the fire was coming from, where it would be the strongest. Also, smoke tends to go up. This is just looming over the Ground Zero remnants. No point source, it's just hanging around there. What is it? This photo was taken at the end of October, Halloween, actually. But what is this white around here? If it were hot, these people would be cooked like on a grill. And its hydraulics wouldn't work. Not only that, they'd permanently destroy their equipment. So they wouldn't have their equipment sitting there if it was going to be destroyed. The people wouldn't be alive if it were hot. What is this white stuff coming out of the ground? And then we notice up above here, you see misting. Why are they misting this? It's not fire. It's not hot. Doesn't seem to be any more where the water is coming from. Water is just being added to this pile. But that's very dense white stuff, whatever it is.
I don't white smoke for 100 days. Sorry, yeah, makes you really wonder.
Now look at what was measured at Ground Zero. There is an extraordinary presence of ultrafine particles. This is conclusive proof that molecular dissociation took place.
How much energy did it take? Well, let's look at some pattern recognition here. We have Mount St. Helens. We have a nuclear test in Nevada. And we have one of the WTC buildings coming apart. To me, they look similar. Probably a similar amount of energy was involved.
Most people would agree you can't get something for nothing. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And yet, we get our oxygen free from the air we breathe. We get sunlight free, and water, that used to be free until bottled drinking water came along. But what about energy? We've always had to pay for that, whether it's wood or coal, oil or electricity. It's always been the rule that you can never get back more energy than what you put in the first place. That's a fundamental law of nature. Physicists of the 19th century figured that out with the first law of thermodynamics, the conservation of energy. Maybe so. But science has come a long way since then. And laws? Well, there's never been one that hasn't been broken.
Well, free energy is basically, and another word for it is zero-point energy. It's energy that is contained within the vacuum of space and which is virtually undetectable by any traditional means In fact, the energy is homogeneous and isotropic, the same everywhere, the same in all directions. And because of that, it's trying to extract it or measure it is sort of like the problem of trying to weigh a beaker of water underneath the surface of the ocean. What do you measure with respect to what? And that's been the physicist's dilemma, and we've gone down one very large cul-de-sac this century. The cul-de-sac meaning that there is no such thing as consciousness. There is no such thing as this zero-point field, or this place from which the energy can come. And the answer now appears to be yes, because theoretical physics and a number of experiments in quantum mechanics show very clearly the existence of this all-pervasive electromagnetic field called the zero-point field.
In fact, although skeptics often point to Einstein's theory of relativity, it was Einstein who in 1920 said,
"There are weighty arguments to be adduced in favor of the ether hypothesis. To deny the ether is ultimately to assume that empty space has no physical qualities whatsoever. The fundamental facts of mechanics do not harmonize with this view. According to the general theory of relativity, space is endowed with physical qualities. In this sense, therefore, there exists an ether. According to the general theory of relativity, space without ether is unthinkable."
Energy drives the planet. It also drives these three inventors. You'll meet a man who makes objects float in the air, a guy who levitates UFOs in his basement, and a self-made scientist who's battled the U.S. government to bring his machine and cheap energy to the whole world. These are the new energy inventors, finding strange new ways to power the planet. What goes up must come down, right? Well, unless you've figured out a way to harness an untapped force in the universe. Enter this lab and everything you know gets tossed out the window. Welcome to the world of John Hutchison, where the improbable may just become our reality. John Hutchison has been dabbling with electricity for decades, copying the work of famed scientist Nikola Tesla, whose AC power still runs our world. Along the way, messing about with military surplus gear, John may have stumbled across one of the most amazing scientific discoveries of our age. Experimenting with radio waves and electricity led John to discover an effect which has mystified government and military scientists. It boils, it bends, it sends objects flying through the air.
In John's labs, I've actually seen levitation of rock. I've seen levitation of steel, steel ball bearings, glass, where they will levitate. Unbelievable. I've seen electricity go right into the objects and a million pieces just fly apart.
Dubbed by some as the poltergeist machine, there is no one machine, just a lot of old Army surplus gear, randomly tuned by John. No one knows how it works. John has apparently figured out the right combination of radio waves and electrical energy to create the effect. If it could be proven, its impact would be huge. You'd have to rewrite most of the science textbooks, especially the part about what goes up. And the story gets even weirder, involving both the Canadian and U.S. military intelligence.
Here we go, into my place. Canadian government seized my laboratory, which was 22 tons of equipment. I came back from Germany and moved into this place here and started my experiments again with Army surplus and Navy surplus equipments. And some of this equipment actually goes back to the 1940s, directional finding equipment, all kinds of neat configurations, waveforms and that, right up to 44 gigahertz. That gives me a wide range and wide spectrum of fields and that to work with.
Of course, given the potential magnitude of an effect which can turn metal into jelly and levitate objects, it wasn't long before news leaked out. In this case, to Colonel John Alexander with INSCOM, U.S. Army Intelligence.
Well, they had an 8mm film, and it was purported to have been taken in Canada, and it showed various items that were levitating, falling, accelerating, and it was sufficiently interesting that we said, want to learn more about that. So we agreed to fund him.
So Colonel Alexander and his team went to Vancouver to test John's effect.
During 1983, U.S. Army Intelligence and Los Alamos National Laboratories set me up in a large laboratory. We did 4 months of testing.
We had a team of 6 people from Army Intelligence and from Los Alamos, including myself, that came out for the demonstration.
As usual, John revved up his machines to create his electronic force field to start the effect. Exactly what happened next is still debated by the various participants.
Probably the most interesting was a molybdenum rod that I used in PK testing. And what had happened is he presented to me, it had a slight S-curve in the rod itself. We looked at it very carefully to see if it had been heated and gripped or something like that, and found no indication that it had. That suggested to us that there were effects that were going on.
In the end, Bob, a skeptical Los Alamos investigator, deemed the tests inconclusive. And according to this letter from Los Alamos, all documents pertaining to the Hutchison tests were destroyed.
According to Bob, the one man, things didn't work, and let's forget about it and classify it.
While officially the tests were brushed aside, Colonel Alexander has kept an open mind. But the fact remained that the U.S. intelligence services left, apparently having written the effect off. Then on the 24th of February 1990, something strange happened. John was out of the country when his lab was forcibly seized by the Canadian government. Despite a court order to return it, John never got his equipment back. When he tried to move his experiments to Germany, the authorities there refused him permission. Months later, John heard a rumor that his brainchild was not dead and buried, but was being studied by the American military.
It was basically classified, and I've been hearing stories for years and feel now that they did get results and are replicating it at Lockheed Martin Skunk Works.
Was it a rumor, or was the largest military power on the planet experimenting with the Hutchison effect?
The Naval Sea Systems Command's Directed Energy and Electric Weapons Systems Program Office, or PMS 405, is investigating the use of high-energy laser systems on Navy surface ships. One such system is the Navy Laser Weapon System, or LAWS. The Directed Energy Warfare Office, or DEWO, of the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Dahlgren, Virginia, is the technical direction agent for LAWS. NSWC Dahlgren has been performing laser research, development, test, and evaluation for decades.
John believes the Pentagon tests of his anti-gravity effect may have ended up at Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, home to secret U.S. military projects, including new types of super aircraft and top-secret or black ops propulsion systems.
I was at Lockheed Martin. I was with Boyd Bushman, a senior engineer there, and he showed me a film that purported to show some of John Hutchison's levitation experiments. Normally I would have kind of looked at this stuff and just thought it's somebody's idea of a practical joke. But the fact that it was being highlighted to me by somebody from Lockheed Martin as something I should be paying attention to kind of got my attention. And that was what really convinced me to go and at least have a look at what John Hutchison was doing. I'm 99% convinced that this is not a hoax. I don't think anyone knows what is going on here, but too many people have looked into it, too many people have investigated, you know, people who have my respect for me to think that it's a hoax.
Eventually, Lockheed Martin would send their own team to conduct tests. But John hasn't heard much since, and he worries about his technology being used for military purposes. Like Galileo in his time, who was imprisoned for looking too closely at stars, John and his technology have been stopped cold, shunned by mainstream science.
Well, some time ago I was doing some testing and got into some big trouble after I levitated a toy UFO and some other objects.
Apparently, John's experiments were lifting objects in nearby homes, and the neighbors called the police.
The police came full bore in here with engineers, inspectors. They photographed all the equipments very carefully. It's almost like if you called in a cleaning crew. They didn't touch anything. It's like they made everything look neater for some strange reason.
It seems like someone in the shadows still cares what our hero is up to. Frustrated by authorities and lack of recognition, John has been spending time developing his new project, batteries that last forever, based on the somewhat bizarre zero-point energy theory. Followers of this theory believe that all physical matter floats in a sea of energy, which, if collected and converted into electrical power, could more than meet all the world's demand for energy.
I got orders from Japan and sponsorship for me to make more of them. So the money would come through into my bank account, and indeed I made units that are actually in Hiroshima City.
While various zero-point energy devices were funded by the Japanese, so far none have taken off on a mass scale.
John Hutchison is probably the very visual proponent of the whole kind of zero-point energy movement. Zero-point energy devices could revolutionize the planet. If you can build a zero-point energy reactor about the size of your microwave oven, put it in the back of your house somewhere, you run your house. You don't need to, you run all its electricity needs. You don't need to pull anything off the national grid. Well, if you put that into the third world, you're going to revolutionize the third world. That is as much a threat to some people as it is a benefit.
And as far as the Hutchison effect goes, I'm rather disturbed that the U.S. government and aerospace corporations has it. The concerns of it being used for an evil force by the military-industrial complex disturbs me quite a bit. I like to see it used for the helping of nature, because there's so much pollution going on with nature. Mankind tends to want to fight each other all the time with wars, whereas Mother Nature rolls on with great energy and power.
It's absolutely essential for the world and survival of the world that we get off petrochemicals. Failure to do so, it really threatens our national survival.
What's the answer to the energy crisis? Suppose a fellow told you the answer was in a machine he has developed. Before you scoff, take a look with Bruce Hall.
In the backwoods of Mississippi, a mile down this dirt road, past the keep out and no trespassing signs, is the workshop of Joe Newman, a brilliant, self-educated inventor who says he has developed a machine that could solve the energy crisis.
Now back to Take Two on CNN.
What if someone invented a machine that would make the gasoline engine obsolete? What if someone invented a machine that produced more energy than it used? And that energy is cheap, non-polluting, and safe. That person would probably be hailed as the greatest scientist since Einstein, with a discovery as important as electricity and as revolutionary as the wheel. Joseph Wesley Newman claims to have invented just such a machine. He says that his energy machine could power every American home, farm, business, automobile, and appliance with electricity at a fraction of the present cost. More than 30 scientists and technicians have tested the energy machine, and they agree It works.
Unfortunately, Joseph Newman lost his battle with the Patent Office. He was forced to give his energy device to NIST for testing, the so-called National Institute of Standards and Technology. You've heard of NIST. They determined the cause of the World Trade Center destruction and made this video to prove it.
According to a 3-year comprehensive building and fire safety investigation just completed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires. We really have a new kind of progressive collapse that we have discovered here, which is a fire-induced progressive collapse. And in fact, we have shown for the first time that fire can induce a progressive collapse.
NIST used detailed data describing the building and its contents to create the most complex computer simulation of a structure collapse ever made. Falling debris from Tower 1 started fires on 10 floors in Building 7.
So you look at the floors failing here, and eventually this column 79 is going to buckle. It fails, and then the entire vertical progression takes place.
The outside shell of the building fell.
World Trade Center 7 collapsed because of fires.
NIST was supposed to determine how the Twin Towers collapsed. This job was given to private military contractors. The ones with the highest bid, of course. The 9/11 investigation was sold to this company and this company. They both specialize in directed energy weapons and psychological warfare.
On this edition of Exposé, enter the shadowy world of government contracting. In the shadow of the Capitol, private contractors thrive on public money. Many of the names are familiar, but you've likely never heard of the multi-billion-dollar company that has received more private government contracts than any other. A recent magazine investigation revealed whether or not this company delivers on its promises, it always seems to fly under the radar, and it always gets paid. Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC. It is the country's 9th largest federal contractor with 44,000 employees, over half of them with security clearances. King and her documents painted an insider portrait of SAIC, going all the way back to its founding in 1969 by John Robert Beister.
Bob Beister was the ultimate authority on everything at SAI. He would go on tirades, say, if this is my company, we'll do it my way.
Beister's way was to tap into the unprecedented demand for private military contractors. With the Vietnam and Cold Wars raging, Beister understood, as Bartlett and Steele would later write, that this was the perfect time for shrewd consultants to get into the war business. From King and her documents, Jim Steele learned that over the years, Beister had stacked his board with Washington heavyweights. Melvin Laird served as Richard Nixon's defense secretary before joining SAIC. William Perry and John Deutsch were on the SAIC board before going on to become defense secretary and CIA director for President Clinton. Admiral Bobby Ray Inman went back and forth, from Vice Director of Defense Intelligence under Gerald Ford to the SAIC board, from SAIC to directing Jimmy Carter's National Security Agency, and serving as Deputy Director of the CIA under Ronald Reagan. And then, back to the board of SAIC.
The joke at SAI was that we had enough generals and admirals to start our own war, and that was true.
A clear sign of nuclear reaction. The mini-nuke theory comes from the fact that the tritium levels at ground zero were way higher than normal. According to the official story, the reason tritium was found was because it was present in the exit signs on the airplanes that supposedly slammed into the towers and made them vanish. This is an interview between Ace Baker and Stephen E. Jones at a 9/11 Truth Conference.
Tritium is an interesting character because tritium can come from other sources. And I mean, backlights of exit, I'm not saying that's what it was, but it could be just something like that. In other words, it can be a contaminant that arises not from nuclear reactions, but from backlighting. And so, yes, the tritium was high, and that was reported and published, but it is not proof of many nukes.
He's right, the tritium does not prove the use of nukes, especially without the ionizing radiation. But it does prove that transmutation occurred, something that Stephen E. Jones has seen before in the 1980s. A low-energy nuclear reaction, something he called cold fusion, which helped to destroy these guys' career. 30 years later, he's back as a 9/11 truther, and he's one of the guys who found thermitic material at Ground Zero. And he brought the Nano-Thermite theory to the mainstream media.
There's been this whole swathe of 9/11 truthers talk about thermite, and indeed, I have to confess that I used to be one of them. I even helped this Steve Jones character editor a video together that showed this thermite in action, supposedly. It's dripping out of the towers of the World Trade Center. But without going into too much detail, I eventually found out that this guy, Steve Jones, was connected to the cold fusion affair of the late 80s, and he was involved in publishing a paper about cold fusion research, which essentially put the work of Pons and Fleischmann and compromised that, because he was talking about something similar.
Since Pons and Fleischmann were both well aware of the pitfalls of premature publicity, why would they bypass the accepted conventions of the peer review system and announce their discovery through the media?
I was thinking, these guys are no fools. They know what they're doing. These are good scientists.
Prior to the 1989 announcement, Stephen E. Jones, a physics professor at nearby Brigham Young University, learned of Pons and Fleischmann's work through an informant at the DOE. In a flagrant example of shameless opportunism, Jones insisted on going public quickly with his comparatively much less clear results. Disparaging the excess heat claims of Fleischmann and Pons, Jones' announcement would have effectively prevented the two scientists from patenting their process, a process they had developed on their own over long years of research. On the advice of university attorneys, Pons and Fleischmann, feeling their backs to the wall, reluctantly delivered their work to public scrutiny. Right away, reports came in of excess heat, much too large to be from any chemical reaction. Laboratories from Texas to India confirmed the presence of tritium, a vital determining feature of a nuclear reaction.
Within 2 or 3 weeks, we got the first results, and several groups started saying, yes, we are seeing excess heat, and but the most important and unbelievable phenomenon at that time was the observation of tritium.
To most classically trained physicists, the idea that low-level nuclear reactions could produce significant heat energy was unthinkable.
The U.S. Department of Energy, or DOE, convened a review panel in April of 1989. Dr. John Huizinga, an early cold fusion critic, was assigned to a chair position, though his bias against cold fusion was well known. Huizinga claimed cold fusion was nonsense and advised authorities against a formal investigation. By mid-July, the DOE panel had completed their damning report.
In conclusion, we have no evidence in our laboratory with any of our samples for fusion.
I'm very sorry that Professor Lewis has no information on the tritium levels. That is available, and is available in the correction list to the paper.
We know the foreground, we don't know the background. I would like to specifically...
The background, I beg your pardon, the background is available in the corrections to the paper.
That might be. I would like to specifically hear whether or not helium...
Could we go on to the question?
Peer-reviewed publications like Nature divisively shamed the discoverers with allegations of incompetence, touching off one of the greatest tragedies in the history of science.
When I finished my book Fire from Ice in 1991, I concluded that the evidence for cold fusion was overwhelmingly compelling. Today, we can no longer say that the evidence is overwhelmingly compelling. It is now 100% certain.
It delivered fusion energy, like that produced in the sun, without emitting deadly radiation.
We didn't call it cold fusion at all. That was a term which was wished on us, but we never called it that. We felt the processes had to be nuclear to account for the high levels of the energy.
Despite the nasty accusations made against cold fusion, accomplished scientists like Dr. Bob Bush and Dr. Edmund Storms of the Los Alamos Laboratory continued their leading-edge work, often producing extraordinary results.
We were seeing this marvelous effect of excess power and integrate over time excess heat in our own laboratory. So it wasn't as if we had to take somebody else's word for it. We had proved it. The conclusion was that the amount of palladium that you could fit on your thumb would be enough to produce a reactor that would supply the city of Los Angeles with all their power need.
MIT's Hot Fusion Center, a federally funded facility, was among the loudest voices to disparage the work of Pons and Fleischmann. Ironically, upon re-examination of their results, disturbing inconsistencies appeared. MIT's raw data provided clear evidence of excess heat, but in MIT's official report, the graph was altered to reflect no excess heat. Engineer Dr. Eugene Maloff, chief science journalist at MIT, resigned in protest.
That's what I thought originally.
In the case of MIT, it was a disaster. These people, before even analyzing their calorimetry data, held a party for the death of cold fusion. And then they manipulated the data to make a positive result look negative. Their results don't prove cold fusion, but they certainly had a positive result.
It's complete nonsense, utterly ridiculous and without foundation.
There are thousands of papers that have already been published on cold fusion showing the evidence for the excess heat, the nuclear products, including helium, tritium, low-level neutrons. But at the same time, we have the establishment of physics and the establishment of science, for that matter, totally ignoring this and, in fact, mocking it.
Pathological science.
Pathological science.
The criticism of pathological science is one which has quite frequently been leveled at unusual investigations, which admittedly sometimes are at fault. However, there is also the situation that people will criticize a field long after they should really have given up. And that is pathological criticism. They just get trapped in a situation. They have made a criticism. They have to maintain their criticism against all the evidence.
With congressional funding dead, Fleischmann and Pons moved to France to carry on their research.
By 1992, we had video recordings of intense energy release. By the summer of 1994, we had demonstrated sustained energy release. If you say you wish to make this into a device by about the year 2000, if the resources had been available, we would have got to that particular point, probably before the year 2000. But this did not happen.
As far as Stephen E. Jones' Nano-Thermite theory, this is the ingredients of thermite. And this is the ingredients of the Twin Towers that were turned into nano dust.
Now, there were folks who somehow believed that thermite had something to do with it. Well, let's see if we can make some. You have a steel structure, the towers, with aluminum cladding. Let's see if you grind them up. And you end up with rust and aluminum powder. Those are the ingredients of thermite. So those ingredients are going to be there anyway. But what does thermite do?
Thermite is a welding material that can also cut steel. I appreciate this truther's experiments. It's great documentation. However, I'm sorry, but this... and this... and this... does not explain any of this. Thermite has never been used to demolish a building. These buildings were not demolished. They were turned into dust in less than 10 seconds each. Thermite has been used in the cleanup of a controlled demolition, which might explain these smoking gun images. But once again, it cannot explain the missing pile of debris, or this leftover pile of evidence, empirical, verifiable evidence. This was Grenfell Tower in London, 2016. Why didn't it fall? I thought they told me that fire melts steel. And as far as the airplanes go, the ones with the wings that completely vanish and make cartoon-like cutouts on towers, towers that are built to withstand impacts from airplanes, and airplanes that aren't even built to withstand impacts from birds. I don't know. I guess these kids are just conspiracy theorists, right?
You shake it?
Yeah. And go. Oh, look at that. Fuck. Let's go from
What?
Isaac Newton said when one body exerts a force on a second body, the second body simultaneously exerts a force equal in magnitude and opposite in direction. Kinda like this. In this test, you'll notice when this aircraft hits this wall, it completely disintegrates into nothing. The same thing that we should have saw on 9/11. Or at least somewhat damaged.
As you see is what's left of a 40-story building. A 40-story building now.
Guys, grab some of them, Mike.
This truck.
Has anybody used an engine?
The mail truck.
511's apparatus.
And now we're being bombarded with messages that Osama bin Laden is planning to attack the United States of America and Israel. And I'm telling you, be prepared for a major attack. But it won't be Osama bin Laden It will be those behind the New World Order. Can you believe what you have been seeing on CNN today, ladies and gentlemen? Can you believe it? Supposedly, a CNN reporter found Osama bin Laden, took a television camera crew with him, went into Osama bin Laden's hideout, interviewed him and his top leadership, his top lieutenants and colonels and generals in their hideout. This is a CNN reporter with a camera crew. And he came out and told everybody, within 3 weeks, Osama bin Laden is going to attack the United States and Israel. Now, don't you think that's kind of strange, folks? You see, because the largest intelligence apparatus in the world, with the biggest budget in the history of the world, has been looking for Osama bin Laden for years and years and years, and can't find him. The FBI also, under the leadership of Louis Freeh, has been looking for Osama bin Laden for years and years and years and years and years and many years, and can't find him. Some doofus, jerk-off reporter with a camera crew waltzes right into his hideout and interviews him. And you know what his budget is? Zip, zilch, nothing. Now, that tells us two things. Either everyone in the intelligence community and all of the intelligence agencies of the United States government are blithering idiots and incompetent fools, including the entire apparatus of the FBI and all of their personnel, or they're lying to us. They're not looking for him at all. And the second is the truth. You see, the CIA created Osama bin Laden. They recruited him. They trained him. They found his leadership. They brought them all together. They showed them how to fight the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, and when that was over, they still continued to fund him and train him, and they're now using him to help bring about world government by making him the big boogeyman, because they can't use Saddam Hussein anymore. Did you ever hear of Osama bin Laden before you heard of Saddam Hussein? When did you start hearing of Osama bin Laden? It was after Saddam Hussein and Iraq were supposedly neutralized in the Gulf War, because they needed a new boogeyman. A reporter from CNN and his little camera crew got in to Osama bin Laden's secret hideout and conducted an interview. If you don't believe me, tune into CNN. They're probably running it right now as I'm speaking. And if you believe it, you are one of the stupidest jerks that ever lived on the face of this earth. And whatever is going to happen that they're going to blame on Osama bin Laden, don't you even believe it. Another social engineering project to change the minds and the attitudes and the beliefs of the people of the world, and especially the United States, to bring about one world socialist totalitarian government. The CIA, the NSA, the FBI, the Defense Intelligence Agency could not find Osama bin Laden in their wildest dreams, but Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols could, and recruit him to be their partner in blowing up the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. Bullshit! How stupid can you be? These guys didn't have a nickel between them. Not a nickel between them. How dumb can you, how stupid can you be? So why do all these fools believe this charade? That a CNN reporter and his little camera crew can do what all the money and all the assets and all the eavesdropping and all the intelligence and all the satellites and all the undercover operatives in the world can never do. It's because they're not trying. They don't want to. Osama bin Laden is their creation, and he is serving them well. When in hell are all you people going to wake up? Are you kidding me? I mean, is this some kind of incredible joke that people are so stupid they'll fall for this? Do you know how much money the CIA and the National Security Agency and the FBI has at its disposal each year? Do you know how many agents they have that they can devote to this? Do you realize the technology that they have to be able to eavesdrop on every single conversation in the world, no matter how it's transmitted, and pinpoint the location of every one of those transmissions? And they can't find Osama bin Laden, but some CNN reporter, he just waltzes right on in there with his camera crew, just like he knew where they were all the time. Bet you it was the CIA that sent him there. I told him where he was. And of course they know where he is because they created him. They're the ones that are funding him and backing him and helping him. I wonder what Osama bin Laden's targets are supposed to be. And if they don't, if this doesn't materialize in the next 2 or 3 weeks, it will eventually materialize. And so I can tell you with a certainty, they must do something terrible in order to stop this backlash and regain the sympathy of the mass herds of sheeple out there. And supposedly, we're not the only nation searching for Osama bin Laden. So the vast economic resources, the vast technological resources, the vast personnel resources, the vast networks and intricate web spun over all these years by the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA can't find Osama bin Laden, but CNN can? Bullshit.
Bill Cooper was murdered by the police in front of his home while they were serving a subpoena for tax evasion. This happened immediately after 9/11. We can only guess where his family is now.
And whatever is going to happen that they're going to blame on Osama bin Laden, don't you even believe it.